Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Firefighters Podcast. Today on the podcast, I speak to Ben Turner. Ben was the watch manager of a firefighter called Aston, Everett, and today's podcast is made in support and in memory of a great man, a great father, a great friend, a great husband, and a great member of our emergency services. Today we speak about his standards, his values, his quirkiness, his fight the power mentality of always doing his own thing and doing what Aston felt was right. Aston unfortunately lost his life at the beginning of the year, and Ben, alongside many people, are looking to do something in memory of Aston to support his family in this very challenging time. Thank you for coming back to the Firefighters Podcast, and I hope this helps people who have struggled with a loss. You appreciate what his family may be going through right now, and I thank you for your time. Ben Turner, welcome to the Firefighters Podcast. How you doing, my man?
Yeah, I'm good. Under the circumstances, I'm doing okay.
Absolutely.
Doing okay.
Now, you and I connected through a mutual sort of brother of the fire service. I saw a incredible but also quite tragic story of a colleague of yours. We've had some conversations about the circumstances. Friends of mine and myself have given donations to what we're about to talk about, but I wanted to try and find a way for us to recognize what's happened. And we're going to speak today about a firefighter called Aston Everett, who has been a colleague of yours for quite some time. So if you could, in your own words, tell us a bit about why you're on the podcast today.
So Aston was a member of my watch. I'm a watch manager, and I suppose I've had associations with that watch for sort of 10 years. I joined the watch as a crew manager, transferring from another station, and then got promoted from crew manager to watch manager, went to another station, and then ended up coming back to the same watch, which was lovely in a lot of ways. You know, nice to come back and
get to see people through different stages of their career and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And it felt, I kind of joked with the watch and said it felt like the longest out duty that I'd ever done. You know, being away for 18 months and then coming back.
Love it.
And all through that time, you know, Aston, I've stayed in contact with Aston. You know, Aston had been in the fire service for about 16 years.
So what many people would consider to be a career firefighter. Yeah,
absolutely. And he always was, you know, I mean, I really believe in trying to develop people in the fire service. You know, it's kind of what I do. I'm always trying to, you know, identify people who I think have got something to give somewhere else. You know, that they could give more. You know, they could be more. They could do. And Aston, for me, I've said it to him loads and loads of times. You know, he would have made a great crewman because he had the right outlook. He had the right set of skills. I mean, brilliant firefighter on the, you know, on the incident ground. You know, he was a safe pair of hands in terms of making the right decisions, asking the right questions. You know,
I love people like that. We've got so many on our crews, and often you feel like the people that should do it the most are interested the least sometimes. You know, the ones with true leadership qualities, and they have a lot of internal challenges with the definition of manager or leadership or something like that, and it is such a shame, because if the good ones don't go for it, then the bad ones with bad morals can sometimes climb the ranks, and that kind of perpetuates the whole idea that bad people go into management. But Aston was one of those that had those natural leadership skills, if you will.
Yeah, but he was never. He was always kind of like, I appreciate what you're saying, but that's not for me.
It's not for me.
And that was, and that was him all over. So, but a brilliant firefighter, and he was 54. So by age, he was coming up to, he would be eligible to retire in April.
So we're speaking a lot about Aston in the past tense here.
Yes. Yeah.
What's happened at the beginning of this year?
So Aston was a USAR reservist, and as part of that, he had to do 2 months working with USAR, kind of on a secondment. So he'd been with us over the Christmas period, and so he was there for the Christmas shift, and was starting his USAR placement on the 2nd of January.
Mm.
So his first day of being with USAR, and mid-afternoon, I got a call from our control room saying, "Can you get the next of kin details for Aston Everett, because USAR need them. He's been found collapsed in the gym." And at that point, that was all I knew at that point. So obviously passed on those details to USAR, and it turned out that he'd been found collapsed in the gym, and from all the information that I could gather, he was in a pretty bad way. Luckily, fortuitously, USAR is round the corner from the main ambulance station in that town, so they sprinted around, got paramedics there within minutes, of finding him. And he obviously got rushed to hospital, and they did some tests and things and discovered that he'd had an aneurysm in his brain had burst.
Okay.
And even at that evening, they said one of the pupils was fixed, and that was a pretty bad sign in terms of damage to his brain. And they rushed him to a brain specialist hospital and did surgery to try and relieve the pressure and things. But it already seemed at that point that it was looking pretty bad. And a few days later, they, having gone through all the tests and things that they needed to do, they discovered, they came to the conclusion that there wasn't really any signs of life, and he was being kept alive. So he passed away a few days later, which was, devastating for the watch. We just couldn't believe it. He'd been with us a few days earlier, and suddenly he wasn't there. We weren't expecting him there because he'd gone to USAR, but we were very much expecting him back. In a couple of months. And Aston had kind of gone off and worked at other stations, but had always kept coming back to the watch and to the station. So he was, an integral part of that kind of watch structure.
Was he a gym guy in general? Was he? You say he was found in the gym. Was that a regular thing for him?
Yeah. He was super fit, but not. He's not a gym dweller, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
He was earlier in his life, he was into boxing, did a lot of boxing. And so he was always, as he got older, he was always kind of like many of us as we get older, aches and pains and all the rest of it.
Crikey, I know it.
But he was definitely a fit guy. And you talk to, I've spoken to people since his death, and talking about actually sparring with him or boxing with him, and
really?
Saying he was always on the front foot. Even when he was being beaten, he was always coming at you. So and that sort of summed up. That's kind of
because I know he was a really
summary of Aston's personality.
Passionate guy in some of the stuff. I mean, before we came on, we spoke about even though, and I'll say even though, but as a role of a firefighter, he never perhaps wanted to step up in the corporate structure, if you will. But he was a real, wanted to fight the power and some of his other stuff. He supported a lot of the union work during the strikes and during some of the really challenging times. He was always the guy who was, wanted to step up for what he believed was good, and he wasn't afraid to stick his head above the parapet, if you will.
No, and he would, he was always sticking his neck out further than anybody else, shouting louder than anybody else.
Because he believed it was right.
Yeah, absolutely, and unafraid of taking on that challenge. I've spoken to his wife several times over the last few weeks, and she was telling me of, she used to say to him, why can't you just blend in with the wallpaper just once in a while, because it was always him who was he was always him kind of, and she was always petrified that he was going to get the sack, because he was always kind of pushing the boundaries of kind of challenging decisions and challenging what was being done. And
I think there's a real challenge in being the spouse or the family member of any firefighter. I mean, it's a privilege, and I don't say that egotistically, but it's also a challenge because there's something innately unique about the problem-solving mindset of a firefighter, is that by sheer nature of it, you need to think outside of the box in a lot of what we do, because we're professional problem solvers ultimately. But it can, and I know I speak with sympathy from my wife, it can be a real labor of love, and it can be very challenging when you constantly want to have that cheeky optimism to see what you can do.
Yes. Yeah. I've never really thought about it like that, but that's a kind of an interesting.
Yeah, we're always thinking of different ways to do things, aren't we?
Yeah, and Aston was very much like that. He was always kind of trying to kind of find solutions to his to life's problems as well, and but with a sense of optimism and an apparent lack of fear. I'm sure, like all of us, we have our moments where we think, well, I'm not sure how we're going to do this. But
so you've mentioned his boxing and USAR and different aspects like that. I know you've been having a lot of conversations with different members of the Watchers and reflecting and stuff over the past few weeks. What have been some of the emerging conversations that perhaps, despite having worked with him for a very long time, that perhaps you were even unaware of? A lot of the things that we've talked about as a watch and across the stations that he's worked out are probably unbroadcastable. We'll get away with it. This doesn't belong to anybody. We can say whatever we like, as long as we're with respect to his family, of course.
Yeah, well, exactly, and that's so that he's had a very an interesting.
He's a colourful gentleman.
Interesting life. Yeah, exactly. But just some of the stories that he'd come up with were just amazing. He'd talk about being younger and he used to get on his bike and drive over to France, and he had this kind of handyman job for this couple who lived in France, and this guy was a writer of some pretty big sort of 1980s television programs.
Christ.
And Aston used to spend the summer there being a handyman and painting things and stuff, but then also be handed copies of scripts to proofread. Just
one of them situations. You just fall into it, don't you?
Yeah. And the other thing about Aston and the kind of his stories was that it's just kind of it was the way that he told them. He always had such a dry sense of humour, and a cheeky grin when he was telling you these things. But he was always getting into scrapes, particularly in his younger days.
Yeah.
But and always finding himself a project, and he was massively into his motorbikes, and
really?
He was a motorbike technician for a racing team for a couple of years. And he loved that, absolutely loved it. It took him away from home too much, but he really enjoyed that. But he kind of designed and built his own chopper. But even in doing that, it was kind of a refusal to conform, because he had this classic bike, and I can't for the life of me remember exactly what bike it was.
Yeah.
But he decided to turn this classic bike into a chopper. So, classic bike lovers hated it because it was sacrilege.
Sacrilege, the purists.
Yeah, exactly. But the chopper enthusiasts were like, well, that's not a proper chopper, that's a classic bike. So, but Aston loved that.
Breaking all the rules.
He created this chopper. Yeah, exactly. He created this chopper bike that was neither liked by the chopper community nor by the classic bike
One of a
community.
kind.
And that was, and Aston, just appealed to Aston massively. And I don't. We were talking about this as a watch. Like, he's, for some reason, and nobody can remember how it came about, he suddenly decided he was going to try and grow a bonsai tree.
Okay.
And it's like, so he he'd taken this old Christmas tree and wired it and was trimming it down and kind of researching on how you grow a bonsai tree. And he used to laugh at himself and go, when I was younger, he used to like tearing out on his bike and, sort of trying to stay out of trouble for kind of pushing boundaries on his bike on the road and stuff.
Yeah.
And now, in his 50s, he's there trimming a bonsai tree.
You know what though? There is so many lessons to be learned from I haven't got a bonsai tree, but my dad's got a few. And if you get into it, it's a bit like the tea ceremony. Do you know what I mean? It's not necessarily about the tea, ironically enough. It's the process of it. Do you know what I mean? And caring and tending to. It's a very meditative practice, something like a bonsai tree. The same as I say with the tea ceremony and a few other principles that come from that sort of part of the world, if you will. There's always more to something that meets the eye. I think he was definitely onto something.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and he was, he was a very thoughtful chap. Underneath his kind of tattooed exterior and his love of motorbikes and causing trouble, or certainly in his younger years, he was a very thoughtful, intelligent chap. And you'd find him reading a book, and his middle daughter was going to university, and he would read the books that she was reading at university so that they could have conversations about it.
God, I love that.
And
that's huge.
And
stuff like that.
Yeah, and that was him all over. It really was.
You referenced the surrounding aspects to Aston there, because what we forget when we see our colleagues day to day. We've seen them grow up through their career, and you never grow up really in the fire service, until you remember the fact that behind that person is their own world and their own responsibilities and their own connections. And you've referenced a few times there that Aston was a family man, and unfortunately, obviously there's many unfortunate circumstances to what's happened, but there is a bit of devastation, obviously, rightfully so, in Aston's wake, and he's left people behind, unfortunately.
Yes, yeah, very much so. And it's interesting that you kind of talk about the behind everybody. In the fire service, we have we know people around the mess table in that situation. But Aston's family, although he talked about his family a lot, and in talking to his wife, I think she was quite surprised by how much I knew about, her and his children, because he talked about them all the time. And when I told her that, she was like, "What? He actually, he talked about us at work." It was like all the time, And there's so many stories.
I think that's very unique about the fire service as well, because I think a lot of people would have that same revelation, because we'll always be honest on the Firefighters Podcast that in the fire service, at times you will have some downtime, whether that's on station, whether it's out on a job. And I think things like stack fires, or when you go into certain things where you're in a defensive position and you're there for 3 or 4 hours, that's when you stood in the middle of a field just turning something over or doing a controlled burn or whatever, and there's where the conversations happen. That's when you're talking about somebody's family, somebody's kids, the challenge they're facing, a passion that they're into. And you don't get that in other jobs. Do you know what I mean? Somebody sitting in the office, they're bored and they're doing their paperwork and whatever, but they never really have that sort of time and scenario to go that deep. And I've had some crazy deep conversations on incident grounds, as I'm sure you probably have.
Yeah, and many with Aston, many with Aston. Talking about politics and beliefs and all kinds of things like that. So
you do end up knowing a lot more about people, like you say, his partner and his children. How many children did he have?
So he had 3 daughters, and the eldest two were Celeste from a previous relationship, so his wife from a previous relationship.
Okay.
And Aston met his wife when they both independently had relationships that had ended, and they both moved back to the same area to be close to family. And I didn't know Aston then. Obviously, that was long before I knew Aston. But his wife was telling me that she'd been having difficulties with her ex, and in her words, Aston saved her, completely saved her. She had 2 children, and Aston wanted to be in a relationship with Celeste, and in her, like I say, in her words, saved her, and took on those girls like they were his own, right from the word go. Yeah. And that, again, that for me, that's Aston, taking on a challenge. And I'm not saying those children were a challenge, but
it is.
It's not something that everybody would take on.
It's not what people think it is. It's, yes, you're there to love and support and everything like that, but it is a challenge. Do you know what I mean? It's not expected necessarily, and it's not something you ever plan for necessarily. So it is a challenge, and it really makes you ask yourself some questions. And I have a huge amount of respect for any step parent, mother or father, that is able to do that, because it's not an easy task.
Yeah, I mean, and for Aston, it goes beyond that, because after they got married, they had their youngest, and after the youngest was born, Aston adopted the eldest 2.
Wow!
So they were a proper family unit, and that was something that,
like you said,
that he really wanted.
Didn't need to do that, but that's just something he felt.
Yeah, and
let's close the loop.
Yeah.
Let's make it official. This is a family.
Yeah, absolutely, and that is exactly what it was. And he adored his children, and he talked about them all the time at work. And as the eldest 2 were growing up and going through that phase when they're going out with their mates and going to parties and things, he'd always be talking about scrapes that they got into. And I think secretly he was quite proud of their rebellious side. He was kind of like, good on you. And at the same time, slightly envious that that he wasn't. He couldn't.
I speak to my stepsons the same way. When the mum's not around, and I'll be like, "Dude, just do it. Here's 20 quid. Go and just have a laugh, mate. Just have a laugh. You'll be fine. Go on. Seriously, don't worry about what mum says. I've got you back."
You've said that out loud now.
Yeah, I know, 100%. She knows. She's not stupid. But in having this conversation, I say obviously wonderful memories. He was in 16 years, and he would have been eligible for retirement this year, you say?
Yeah, I mean, we used to laugh at him because he'd change his mind about whether he was going to go from one tour to the next.
Don't they all? Yeah.
Like, no, I'm going in April. That's it. Yeah. And then the next week, no, I think I'm going to stay. And I think it was that sort of uncertainty about the future and uncertainty about what the pension might look like.
God, yeah. And we're living in certain times
or 5 years time.
And it sounds like he was incredibly passionate about the job anyway. So some people genuinely don't want to go.
No, and I think there was an element of that. But he kind of knew, even though he could retire, he was coming up to being eligible to retire. He wasn't financially, he wasn't they weren't sorted. And with 16 years, your pension is not, as everyone in the fire service knows, 16 years is not going to give you a pension that's going to sort you out for the rest of your life. So he was well aware that the future outside of the fire service was going to involve working.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of that, balancing those kinds of things.
Even in the past 18 months, which has been obviously during the pandemic, Aston's had his own challenges. Didn't he have COVID himself last year?
Yeah, he did. Yeah, he contracted COVID very early on.
Right early on in the early time of the pandemic, wasn't it?
Yeah. So sort of back in sort of April sort of time.
Because people forget that, on the front line, we sometimes, obviously, we have to be out. We couldn't have been locked down completely. We've obviously had to restrict a lot of our duties and stuff, but I'm not saying he caught it as a result of his job, but he went through a really challenging time. I'm sure it was quite worrying for his family even then, but off the back of that, you were saying how he's sort of taken it upon himself to go over and above.
Yeah, absolutely. So during the pandemic, Aston contracted coronavirus and tested positive very early on. sort of April last year, and he was properly poorly with it as well.
Oh, really?
And he was contacted by the NHS, and they said to him, "Would you be involved? Would you be prepared to give your plasma to help with treating people who were suffering with it, and also to help with research?" And Aston, being Aston, said, "Yeah, of course I will." So he was, gave up his own time, didn't get any expenses for it, and was doing a 150-mile round trip every few weeks to travel to the where they were collecting it. And he did that for even he was doing it up until like this, the end of last year. He was, I think, was the last. We're still going with that, and that was, that's Aston all over, really. He wanted to do it, wanted to help, wanted to do it properly.
So as part of in memory of Aston, I know people have set up the ability for people to support him, because this would have been, like he says, his final year before he would have been eligible for retirement. So in support of his family, what have you guys and girls been doing?
So what we've decided to do is to set up a Just Giving page, which is basically open to anybody. We kind of, on a Just Giving page, you're supposed to set a target, and we were kind of like, well, what kind of target do you come up with?
Yeah.
So we set the target as £32,000, which, people will be going, what? Why did you choose that number? So that is basically it. The idea is that that's a firefighter's salary, more or less.
Yeah. That's what he would be contributing to his family for this year. Yeah. For them to have time and because financial concerns are one of the most unfortunate and difficult things to have to address when going through a tragedy like this.
And that has, in talking to his wife, that has been a major concern for her, because Aston was a very traditional man's man. He was, he introduced me to the expression "pink jobs and blue jobs."
Did you really?
Are you familiar with that?
Yeah. We don't practice it in this house, but I'm familiar with the concept.
Yeah, you say that.
No, I'll tell you what, man. I do no end of what would be considered in the pink jobs, most definitely. Only because I'm quite a stickler. I'm a little bit of a high standards kind of guy, and I share it with her. But also I love cooking. So anyway, we digress.
But Aston was very much a kind of, you stay at home, you look after the children, you look after the house. I will go out and I will work. So he was the breadwinner.
And for like a lot of families, that's still the case, and that works. For a lot of families, that's a very healthy sort of arrangement.
Yeah, absolutely. And for a lot of people, I think it's kind of it would be the desire, wouldn't it? If life would afford the lifestyle that you want without having to both go to work, then there's a lot of people that would choose to do that if they could. But of course, with Aston's death comes that financial uncertainty into the future. Now, having said that, the fire service have been brilliant in terms of making sure that his family are okay short term, and kind of and looking, making sure that they get the support that they need. But what we wanted to do was just try and take some of that worry away, just to give them some space, like you say, and some time to be able to grieve their losses without having to worry about how they were going to pay the bills for the next. So we've set up this Just Giving page, and
what's the response
we've been blown
like?
away, to be honest. It's been amazing.
Isn't it? You're up to like £15,000 now, isn't it?
Yeah, we went over just over £15,000 this morning.
Awesome.
Which is, absolutely. I'm just, it's for anybody who's listening who has donated, thank you so much, because it is going to make a massive difference. And the family are just blown away. Some of the Facebook messages that we've seen from his daughters and from his wife, but just, you can just see that they're kind of amazed, although they loved Aston dearly, and he was their world. He wasn't, as we've talked about already, he didn't fit in. He wasn't a conformist.
No, he was the square peg in the round hole.
I think they're amazed by how loved he was, by across the service, and it's not just the fire service.
Loved and respected as well, because again, even for people that don't personally know Aston, from my service, Aston's name and the link and stuff like that has been passed around, and some people have shared stories. But even then, what stood out more was the example that he led in his life and the way that he led his life, and what he stands for as an operational firefighter in the UK, and how he chose to conduct himself. I think commands a lot of respect, and that will, for me, is what sort of led me, because I don't know him personally, but that's what led me to think, you know what, if I was in that situation, or if my family was in that situation, what do I think would be the right thing to do? And that's what led me to our conversation.
Well, and the thing that caused me most, obviously at the time that we set up this page, I mean, I've shed a lot of tears in the last few weeks, as you can probably imagine. But I had a kind of personal conflict with myself, because I know that Aston would hate. Deep down, he would just be going, "Oh my goodness, what are they doing?"
Yeah.
And he would hate the thought that people were being so generous towards him for and what in his words he would describe. He's a proud man, a really proud man. But the flip side to that argument for me is Aston would love the fact that his family were being cared for in this situation, and that is what's driven me to do this. That's what's made me go, actually, I am gonna do this, even though I think Aston would be quite cross. If he's looking down on me now, if you believe in those sorts of things.
Well,
I think
it's in his best interest.
I can't believe you've done this. Well, exactly, and he's not here to fight me.
People forget as well that in any present or any gift or anything like that, because people are like this in birthdays and Christmases. Oh, don't get me anything. It's ridiculous. No, I don't want it. They forget that half of the process and half of the benefits of a gift of any form or a donation of any form is not just in the receiving, but it's in the giving. Do you know what I mean? Because so many people will hear Aston's story and they will feel a desire, an urge to connect, to support, to do something about it, to alleviate the pain, and this enables them the ability to do that. There's lots of ways to do it. They can contact, they can all sorts of stuff, but this is a nice, easy way with very tangible outcome and a very justifiable cause for people, if they want to, can donate to it.
And the messages that have been left with the donations have been lovely as well, and my plan is to pull all of those together and pass them to the family. I mean, they can see the comments anyway, but just that they've
important.
got, at a time in the future, they can they can look
when
back
they're ready
at
to
those
process
and
it and put it in a book or something. It'd be incredible, I think.
But they're not, so like as you say, some of the donations that we've received have been from people who didn't know Aston, aren't related to the fire service in any way, shape or form, but have given because he was a firefighter, and that role of a firefighter does carry respect amongst a large amount of the population.
It is a big sacrifice to make. It is just a job at the end of the day. It is just a job, but it's more than just that, because you could choose to do anything. So choosing to do something like that, I feel strongly, hence the whole podcast, that the community have a great respect for what all people in the emergency services do. Our NHS, our police, our firefighters. Yes, it's a job they choose, but I think the last 18 months has really shown what that job can entail at times.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So for people that want to reach out and for people that want to support it, how can they reach out to the Just Giving page? How can they reach out to yourself?
So the email, are you planning to put a link on?
Yeah, all the links will be in the bottom of the show notes and stuff like that. They'll be on the comments.
So if you do a Google search for Firefighter Aston Everett, then it will. I think the third thing that comes up in Google is the Just Giving page. But the Just Giving kind of tagline for the page is obviously justgiving.com, and then it's /crowdfunding /supporting Aston Everett's family.
Everett, and that's
Everett is EVERETT. So supporting Aston Everett's family.
Awesome.
It was interesting kind of listening to your other podcasts, and you did the one with Phil Maynard and the Helping Hoodies.
Yeah, love Phil.
And there was a kind of a big section about that, talking about discipline in the fire.
Discipline, baby. Standards. Come on. Yeah. It's not that hard. Well, it's striking that balance.
Yeah. Well, if you want to talk about standards, if you wanted to hold up a kind of, the personification of standards in the fire service, that was Aston all over.
People forget as well that those standards are forged often through challenging situations, and that requires putting pressure on people. And I know through Aston's career, he joined at a similar time to me, maybe a couple of years prior to, and the standards were guided or trained or imposed at times in a different way, but that's led to some of the incredible people we have on the front line today.
Yeah, absolutely. But even after 16 years, still folding his fire gear for a roll call, still wearing his shirt all day, every day. We had a situation with a previous watch manager who had kind of conceded to we'll just wear t-shirts for roll call. And Aston was like, no, I'm wearing a shirt for roll call. That is what I do. That's part of that's the uniform. That's what I should be wearing for roll call. And and Aston was constantly setting his own personal standards, and they were his standards. He was never trying to force them on anybody else, but through his standards, he made everybody else want to be better.
It's a value of association.
Everybody want to be exactly
those people that turn the temperature up in the room, and you've got to lift them up, and they do have a huge effect.
And he will be. Not only will he be sorely missed as a character on the watch, but professionally he will be greatly missed. Certainly by me. As a officer in charge, sat on the front of the fire engine. You get a challenging job, and you turn around and
you do. You have a glance in the back of the pump.
You look round and
who have I got with me? Yeah. All right, thank God.
Yeah,
they're here.
Yeah, exactly. I will be. And if Aston was there, we'll be all right. This will be fine, because he wasn't afraid of a challenge. He wasn't afraid to work hard.
Yeah.
And he would want to do he would always want to do the job properly. We have core skills assessments. I don't know if you have those.
Yeah, we have them.
And test you on that. Yeah. And
draw by numbers.
we spent yeah, exactly. We spent some time kind of brushing up on polishing off those the rough edges of those drills. And Aston was like, no, that's cheating. Like, they can come and test me, but if I fail this, then I clearly can't do my job. Now, that was never going to happen, because Aston is a brilliant firefighter. But in his mind, he was kind of like, they should just turn up unannounced and come and test me.
Yeah, 100%.
Because that is me. Come and find me on any day, and I will do what I need to do.
Yeah,
and
I'm
that was
totally with him there. I really hate it when they do that. When they're like, "Oh no, we're not going to come for a couple of months," and the first time, and still they come up with some stupid stuff. Sometimes where people are like, "We won't have any white helmets on the drill yard." I'm like, "Why?" Well, because it makes people nervous. Good. You know what I mean? What? So if we're at a job, we're like, "Can everybody just take their white helmets off, please, so we can pitch this ladder?" What the hell are you on about? Do you know what I mean? They need to do it.
Yeah,
they need to do it under pressure. Do it now. Anyway, don't get me started.
Well, I think there is an element of that has been lost from
it has
training school, hasn't there?
It has, unfortunately.
And people kind of that sense of pressure, and I don't know how you without kind of having that sort of shouty, kind of almost military kind of environment in a training school. I'm not sure how you create that pressure that you will find yourself on when you attend an incident.
It's incredibly difficult to simulate it. Incredibly. I think, the art of teaching and the art of learning as well is a very delicate balance. I see people do it well. And I agree there were some bullies from those days. Very few and far between. Yeah. Very few and far between for me personally. I think we've sometimes maybe thrown the baby out with the bathwater in terms of how some training is led sometimes. But we'll not digress into that one this time.
Yeah.
Ben, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today, my man. I really appreciate your time, and I know it was difficult for you to do it as well, and I want to acknowledge you because you're not necessarily used to doing anything like this, and I know you had to wrestle with yourself and remember what the reason was, and with all due respect, you had to kind of get over yourself a little bit, didn't you? And think, you know what, this is a bigger cause. It's a bigger cause than me, and it's a great thing that you're doing, brother.
Oh, thank you very much, and thank you for the kind of the opportunity to promote the page and generate hopefully a bit more support for Aston's family.
100%.
At the end of the day, that is what this is all about.
Absolutely. We've kind of accidentally created a really unique and powerful thing that, you know, no larger entity has got control over. We want to lift up those people of the community, because ultimately, like I've said before, not all heroes wear capes, and Aston's family will be undertaking some heroic tasks over these coming years, and for people that are able to and willing to support them, we know it will be appreciated.
No, absolutely.
Ben, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Brilliant, Pete. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you for your time, my man. Send love to the family and send support to the guys and girls on station, and I will speak to you soon, brother.
Yeah, will do. All right, lovely.
Take care, my man. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
That was my conversation with Ben. It was great to hear some of the stories that Ben shared. Aston lived a wonderful life in the fire service, and it sounds as though he was one of those really reliable members of the crew who you could lean on for professional support, moral support, and also guidance. You know, whether or not he ever took up a leadership position or not, many members of the fire service are leaders, no matter what they've got on their shoulders. And everybody will know what I mean when I say that. It was really great to have Ben on. I know it was difficult for Ben to do that, and it will be difficult, as I'm sure, for members of his watch, members of his family, both inside and outside of the service, to hear it. From the Firefighters Podcast, our love and support goes out to the family, to the watch, and to all members of the emergency services and the public who have dealt with a tragic loss in this challenging time that we find ourselves. Thank you for coming back to the Firefighters Podcast. Thank you for this rare opportunity to give our support to an individual, to a family, and to a community that really goes above and beyond to keep everybody else safe. Thank you for your time, and we'll see you next time.